So if you don't know who this guy, does anybody know who this guy is? That's where I'll start. That is Ned, Mr. Ned of the Ned rig. And it's so funny because when you are talking to him, he's an outdoor writer from Kansas. And he just likes to go out and catch fish. He's not a tournament angler. He writes about how to catch more fish. He's been doing it for 100 years or close to it. And he is a super, super nice guy. I've talked to him a number of times on the phone. And he just likes to go out and catch a lot of fish. Well, when you call it the Ned rig, he calls it the Midwest Finesse rig because that's what it was called back in the 80s when they first started fishing the technique. And I think that's just funny. That just shows you how humble the guy is. He refuses to call it the Ned rig. So where did it start? In the early 80s, the lenders, and this is what Ned told me. He said the lenders showed him this little gopher mushroom head, and that you put a worm on it, kind of like we do with the Ned rig, and then it became known as the Midwest Finesse rig because he's out in Kansas. A lot of those anglers out in that part of the country started fishing that little head because he was writing about it, because he was an outdoor writer. They started writing about it, and so they started fishing it. But it really stayed as a regional technique, and that's where I think the name Midwest Finesse rig kind of stuck with it. And in his head, that's still what it is. But then in 2006, Ned Cady was at a writers' conference at Table Rock, and he got in Kevin Van Dam's boat, and Van Dam was doing his due diligence and handing him all the latest baits from Strike King, and one of the latest baits from Strike King at that time was a 5-inch Zero, which is a bait that looks exactly like a Senko, but it's made from that Elastec technology, so it floats. We all know that the Zeros did not last, but Ned took that bait back to his fishing when he was back at home, and when he was back at home, he ran out of the baits that he was using. And so he was looking through his tackle box, and he said he pulled out this bag of Zeros, and he said, maybe I'll cut this in half. Well, he cut that bait in half, and since it had the flotation to it, he threw it out, and it had a different action. Although very, very subtle, it did have a different action. But the thing that he really liked about it is the thing lasted for 1 million fish and wouldn't tear up. So that kind of, once the people from Z-Man, the people at Z-Man were making the Strike King, if you don't understand that, they made the Elastec technology for striking, and they still do on those baits. So that's why Z-Man caught word of this guy out in Kansas murdering all the fish, not technically murdering, it's just a term, murdering all the fish. Don't listen to David Dudley's video on that, by the way. But murdering all the fish back in Kansas. So they went to him and talked to him, and then so that's when the Finesse TRD kind of came to be. And his whole goal, Ned Cady's whole goal with the Midwest Finesse rig was to try to catch 100 bass in 4 hours. Like that was his big goal. And he had never done it until he started fishing the Midwest Finesse rig with the Strike King Zero cut in half. Before that, he said he didn't catch 100 bass. And then once he started doing that, boom, they started catching 100 bass pretty consistently. I was like, Dan, I don't know what lakes you're fishing on, but wow. All right, and so then in 2012, he said they set a record by catching 120 bass between him and his cousin in 4 hours, and that's their personal record, which is pretty amazing. Now, they're not catching all lunkers, but they're just catching obviously everything that bites. So we've established kind of the history of it. Why does this thing work? And there's only one way for them to figure out what it is, because they don't have hands like we do, and they can't pick it up and look at it, and they can't pull their phone out and do a Google search and see what this thing is, like we do when we see crazy looking bugs and stuff. But so it creates a lot of curiosity with them, and so I think that's one reason they'll go ahead and eat it and hold on to it, because they don't know what it is. They see something kind of swimming or moving along, and so they get curious. They can't really tell what it is, so they just go ahead and eat it. All right, next slide. So how do you fish this thing? So here, I mean, this is here's the little rig. It's tiny, it's little, right? Can't be so hard to fish it. Well, my first light bulb that went off in my head was when I was talking to Ned Cady, and I was asking him about his leader. because I had been fishing it on 6-pound test, and I tried it on 8, and then I was like, no, it's just the bait is so small. I feel like it's got to, you got to use really light lines. So I went back to 6-pound test, and then I talked to Ned K. He said, no. You fish it on 10-pound leader. 10-pound leader, Ned, you're fishing a 1/20th ounce head on this thing a lot of times, and I mean, doesn't even really get to the bottom. And he said, yeah, I know. Okay, all right. So then it kind of led into more about, exactly how do you fish this thing. Well, his number one way to fish a Ned rig is right there on the top.
It's Mike Iaconelli. This is Bass U TV.
Here's what's awesome about Bass U TV.
You get the top instructors.
You will learn things at Bass U that you will learn nowhere else.
We take the mystery and the myths out of bass fishing.
Real tools that help you catch more fish consistently.
At Bass U TV, shoes are optional.
And I like turtles.
And that's why you want to check out Bass U TV.
Join the Bass U family.
Welcome to Bass U TV.